This video is going to cover what is considered romantic architecture. It is a style that started in Bavaria and it is connected to Baroque and Rococo. It mostly happened in the area around Germany and Austria, and happened in the Alps. It was actually a movement that was an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement. And so, what you're going to start seeing now is we've figured out a lot about how to make buildings stand up. So now we started getting really creative about them, but also humans have begun to globalize. Philosophy has become a really important part of our development as humans. And so there are movements that are starting to happen. They're not just styles anymore. They're more encompassing than that. And so you're gonna see we've got this blend of, okay, so evolved out of Baroque and Rococo, but now we're blending medieval and Asian styles of architecture in here. And it was meant to be a revolt against the aristocracy and against the political norms of the Enlightenment, specifically against scientific rationalization in nature and art. And you're going to see this happens. That people who are opposed to something because they find it too severe or too silly or too something kind of the pendulum swing tends to go in the opposite direction. And that is very true with artistic movements. And then just these are just some examples, random examples. This one is in India. And this kind of was something that happened all over. You're going to see that this romantic style, it began in Eastern Europe, but it spread. And they stressed emotion being important in aesthetics. Sometimes, essentially, I guess the best way to put this is sometimes the harshness of reality can bite a little too hard and people want an escape. And just a lot of examples. They were mostly castles, and castles are residences, so it pretty much fits with what we were studying as part of the history. This is in Finland. This is in California. William Randolph Hearst owned a newspaper, and he had some property in California along the coast, along the Pacific coast. You can see the ocean from his house. And I know because I lived in California for a while, and I did a tour of the castle. It's very impressive. And yep, here you go. That is a picture from Plain Wing, but the ocean is roughly a little bit further beyond. It's on top of one of the hills. Ocean's still further away. But you see, it's very romantic, right? I mean, it looks romantic. It looks like this escape, this giant escape. And yes, it's slightly pink. He had formally called it the Enchanted Hill, but he referred to it as the ranch, which is kind of hilarious because it was anything but. Yeah, you see, there's the view of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. And the whole grounds were just crafted around in the style. And it was a Spanish style of Romanticism. The architect was a woman, Julia Morgan. He would frequently tear down and rebuild structures, so it was never completed in his lifetime. And so he would travel around and he would find architecture he liked. And that's why you see this mix of Romanticism and Spanish cathedral. There's also, I think we'll see, I think it's in the next couple of slides, you'll see some Roman, down here with the colonnades. This was totally Roman and Greek influence. But yeah, he had a female architect working on his residence, which is at that time rare. This is the David, one of the Davids, in a statue. So there's a little replica of that. But it's very, yeah, caryatids. These are part of Greek architecture where they have columns that are shaped like women. And so you see that he very much has that European influence to it. 56 bedrooms. And this is interesting, 61 bathrooms. Usually you have more bedrooms than bathrooms. It was amazing. It was a nice place to stay. I mean, it would be a nice place now, and it was 1800s, late 1800s when he was working on this. Yeah, and there's the pool, and you can see very, very Greek and Roman, Corinthian order. When you have a piece of stone that you carve things away from, these become friezes. I think the pool was heated. It's beautiful. So they did a gravity-based water delivery system from a fresh spring. So the water was always clear and clean. Pretty impressive. Lots of cherubs, because cherubs are very romantic. It was actually slightly pink. You can't really tell in that picture. And she said, the place on the hill grows and from a distance begins to assume the look of an old hill town. There is no effort to make the buildings themselves other than modern. They photograph badly, so I judge the actual charm is in the color, for the garden begins to be lovely in a sophisticated way, which was a very nice way of saying she hated it. And that's what happens, right, when you begin to have all these different styles. I mean, it does feel very disconnected, and she's right in the sense that at least the garden separates things from each other. I mean, I think she did it well, but it is a monstrosity. Oh no, I was wrong. It was the early 1800s. I thought it was earlier than that. It was early 1800s. Yeah, you can see this is all stolen from Europe. So it has these very Baroque elements, but it also has Rococo elements, because the happy ones, the cherubs and those are Rococo, whereas this is Baroque. So you can see the influence of Islam. He had an indoor pool. You could go up here and jump off into the platform. I believe somebody died in the pool. There was a story about how somebody died and they didn't find him to the next day. And not that that's relevant, but just everything is just covered in detail. So some of these interior shots, romantic, but now we've also got the Gothic Arch. And that is Hearst Castle. And if you're ever out and around San Francisco, it's just south of San Francisco along the Pacific Highway. This is in Scandinavia. There's another version. Far less detailed than Hearst Castle, but still romantic. Romantic cottage, very large cottage. This was it's where initially it was a residence, but then it became an office, and then eventually it turned into a museum. But it did start off as a residence, as you can see in the photos. Wood, stained black, stone. The front of it has these all wood shakes. Some of it's stucco. Yeah, see the wood shakes. That's what the scaly looking wood is. Stained glass. So the residence was built by a man who was in love with his partner's wife or something. I've forgotten the story. I think it's in here somewhere. That door, it's beautiful. Very romantic, right? You know? And then the inside is totally Scandinavian design. Very Scandinavian inside. Inside does not match the outside. It's a little romantic on the inside, but more traditional. That's romantic. But that's a little less, a little more Scandinavian. Okay, so New Schwanstein Castle. Basically, it's the new Schwann Castle. And if it looks familiar to you, it is because Walt Disney used it as a basis for his castle at Disney World. And romantic, right? So it has a story. Mad King Ludwig. He was in love with Wagner's opera, The Swan Knight. And he considered himself to be the Swan Knight. And he never married, and he lived in the castle by himself, in that big castle by himself. And there were all kinds of rumors about him. It's beautiful, isn't it? Let's see if I've got a... And there's the swan. So there were swans everywhere. There were swans all over the house. Brick, ashlar stone, sandstone. Sandstone's easy to carve. All the royal regal teak. Right? It looks like Disney. That was his source of inspiration. And so the king... Sleeping Beauty's castle, that's what I said, right? So the king had every modern convenience that was available at the time. And I'll show you the kitchen. This was these are the interiors. Very romantic. I mean, it's hard. I don't know how else to describe it other than it looks like a fairy tale. It looks like it belongs in a Disney fairy tale. And, you know, it preceded Disney. And here we go. Here's the swan print, Swan Knight, everything swan related. And the king was a big guy, apparently. He was like 6'4" or something. Very good swimmer. And paintings everywhere. And so I don't know if it's that, you know, because Disney incorporated this so much into their work that we all just look at it and go, that's romantic. Because it is. It's very romantic. It's Disney. Okay, so he had this modern kitchen. And back then, you didn't have hot and cold running water in the kitchen. And so that was something new that happened. So Mad King Ludwig brought it in. So there's talk about that he may have had some mental disorders, and that may be why he isolated. He might have been gay, and, you know, back then that was not tolerated. So rather than, you know, marry somebody, he just chose to live alone. But they found him drowned in a very shallow pool of water, which was surprising because he was a good swimmer. And so they don't know if he ended up drowning himself or if he was murdered. But that was it. And, you know, he created this beautiful home. And it's very romantic. Okay, we're going to stop here.